unfortunately, life is up and down and bad will
Mm-hmm.
find us. So using that as your rationale for why you don't pursue more
Right.
love, more joy, more hope, more opportunity, more faith, it's actually a plan that doesn't work.
Right.
It will come back around no matter
Right.
what.
Yeah.
So if the hard times are going to find you, let them find you laughing. Let them find you
Right.
dancing. Let them find you trying to build a company. Let them
Right.
find you doing something worth doing.
That voice and our guest today is best-selling author and podcaster Rachel Hollis.
And boy, did we have such a fun time connecting with her. Now, I had met her when I did her podcast out in LA, and Connie, you then got to experience what a joy she is. She's been on this journey of heliotropic growth for a number of years, and she's brought her audience along with her.
That's right, her audience of millions, where she's got a lot of followers. There's so many amazing insights from Rachel that she brings to the party, and now she's putting all that into her next book. So after 3 best-selling books that she's already got on the table for us, she's got this 4th one coming out in January, and it's called What If You Are the Answer? And it's the perfect time. We're proud to be part of this launch with her, and now we can share these insights with all of you. I love this conversation. Let's get right into it.
It's such a delight to be chatting with you again, Rachel.
Yeah.
Connie, I told Connie about my visit to you, and you don't know this, but you were my very first in-person, in-studio podcast experience. And I came away from it with such a wonderful impression of you. And I told Connie about how you made me feel. You made me feel so welcomed. You made me feel listened to. You were so hospitable. I don't know if you remember, but we were done and I was like, okay, I got 5 hours till my flight back. I want to go for a walk. And you were so elegant in your, no, I'm busy, but here, why don't you go to the Getty Museum? And then you purchased a ticket for me at the Getty.
Anything to get him gone.
But it was a beautiful.
No, I just wanted to take care of you.
Well,
That was so
did.
sweet.
Not only do you want to take care of you, you did take care of me. It's the kind of thing that we talk about in our podcast, in your work. I didn't know who you were at all. And afterwards, I swear to God,
I did.
Read them, listened to them, read your newest, and listened to your podcast this morning. So my wife said, how do you feel about your interview with Rachel Hollis today? I said, I feel great. I feel like I know her. I feel like it's such a relaxed, chill conversation. I'm thrilled that we get to do this. And Connie's so thrilled that you get to meet Rachel Hollis. Let's rock and roll.
I was jealous. He got to come out and see, especially when I saw that edit come back. Rachel is just so relaxed. You guys back in those swing chairs and everybody's fine. And it just your legs were crossed. And I thought, well, that looks nice and cozy.
Yeah, I really wanted, I think that is such a lovely perk of getting to record the podcast at my home. And that was very intentional, was I wanted people to come into my space and I want to make you coffee and chat about travel and do the whole thing because I feel like that's one of those elements that's often lost today is welcoming people into your home. And I think if I can do that in the business setting, it's really, I don't know, it just makes for a more realistic and beautiful experience, I hope, on both sides.
Well, and it's the brand, it's your brand too. I think that's the way you present yourself in social media. You know, I watch everything from the eyebrows. I really wanted to have better eyebrows for you today, but I do not. And between that and what was my favorite, I think I mentioned to you guys that I saw when it was like dressed like a grandpa today. You said, I've gotten this my whole goal in life today.
I'm still dressed like a grandpa.
You are not dressed like a grandpa.
No, I am.
And you did not look like a grandpa that day either. But I get such a kick out of that because I do feel like I'm welcomed into your home. I know what's going on. I know when you're having a great day, when you're not having such a great day. And I think that's what makes you.
Yeah, I think I have really felt the call, especially in the last 6 months. I don't know if you guys feel like this, but everything that I see in media, and I'm sure it's because we're in an election year and it's so divisive, is it just feels hard. It all feels very hard. And our real lives are hard. Every single person I know has responsibilities and things that they're going through. So I try as much as possible to show up authentically. Like you said, Connie, if I'm having a hard day, I will say it. But simultaneously, I really am just trying to post things that are joyful. I'm usually laughing at myself. Like, I assume nobody cares that I made butter chicken on Sunday night, but I'm gonna like show you me cooking for my kids because I just hope that there's a little bit of levity when I
Mhm.
put those things out there that can hopefully counterbalance some of the harshness that we see in media.
It definitely does.
I have listed all of these quotes and comments that I've been taking notes while I read and listen to your books and soon to be released book. The answer is you. So I wrote down all these questions. I said to Connie, listen to these questions and comments I would like Rachel to comment on. We don't know. We won't get through all of them, but you'll go, oh, yeah, I remember saying that.
You know what I'd love to do,
What?
Harry, though, is and it's not all of our listeners are gonna know Rachel, like, you didn't before. I mean, I do. My 33-year-old daughter is just so excited that we're talking to you today. But give you a chance to just kinda give us a little bit of a Rachel backstory, how you started where you are and how you got to where you, because this new book that's coming out is just it's this new level. It's this evolved Rachel, and I'd love to have this backstory as part of the interview before we get to all that, if that's okay.
Yeah. So I actually started, and I'm going to say in the internet back in 2008 as a blogger.
Mhm.
And that was sort of the heyday of starting a blog. And I really, like most things in life, didn't know what I was doing. I just would write little things about my life. I would write
Mhm.
about what I made for dinner or how I made a throw pillow or some gardening that I was trying.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know that I was very good as a lifestyle blogger. I didn't make pretty pictures. It wasn't curated beautifully.
Mhm.
But I think I've always been pretty good at communicating with particularly a female
Sure.
audience
Mhm.
because I really do imagine that I'm just talking to a
Mhm.
friend. And so I started to write this blog, and over time it grew and got a little audience and then got a little bigger. And I was able to start hiring people to help me. So all of a sudden I
Yeah.
had a food stylist who could take
Mhm.
my recipes and actually make them look appetizing.
Mm.
And I built this lifestyle website and did that for several years and really enjoyed it and had a really good
Mm.
time and had a little staff of 5. And I still today, a lot of those blog posts are on my website. I was
Mhm.
actually just looking at them the other day and I was like, I'm really proud of this
This is
stuff.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful and it's well written. And I think still has an audience of people that check it out. And as I was writing every day, and I'm a voracious reader, I
Mm.
love books. Books are responsible for who I am today.
Mhm.
And I think it's pretty common, I would assume, if you're writing every day for your job and you're reading every day for pleasure, that you start to think about what you might write if you got to write a
Mhm.
book. And I remember 11 years old, the first time I realized that was someone's job to write the books that I was reading. And I thought, oh, wow, that would
Yeah.
be amazing to be able to
Mhm.
write books. The first book that I attempted to write, or I guess I didn't attempt, I actually pulled it off, was a fiction book based on my own experience. So I had
Mhm.
moved to Los Angeles as a very young woman and started working in an event planning firm that was throwing pretty big celebrity events. And I was such a country mouse and I was so out of my element.
Mhm.
And then years later, I would use that as the impetus for the first book I ever wrote. And that is one of my favorite stories, actually, if you'll let me tell it,
Mhm.
is I had dreamed of being an author for so long. And I had told myself that all I needed to do to be successful as an author was just finish a manuscript. Like I just thought if I could
Just
just
one.
finish, then I
Mhm.
will be able to have this dream come true. And I finished my first manuscript and I got a literary agent, and that literary agent sent it to different publishers. You know, you hope that
Yeah.
someone will publish it. And one by one, that book was rejected. And it was rejected. I was told over and over, it's too sweet. It's too sweet. And what that was sort of lingo for it's not a sexy book. There's nothing like sort of scandalous. There's nothing sexy. It's too sweet of a story. And I got pretty far with a couple publishers and I had to do calls with them and they said, it's really sweet. And I was like, thank you. And they
Yeah.
were like, yeah, we don't really want that's not what the market
Yeah.
wants right now. Do you think you could make this a sexier book? And this was just right about the time of 50 Shades of Grey and those kind of books, and that's what they were asking for.
Mhm.
And all I could think of was my Meemaw and
Mhm.
what she would think if I wrote it. And I was like, I can't, I don't even know how to write that. I barely know how to do it.
Yeah.
So, like, I
Certain
can't
things you
do
don't wanna
it.
share with me, Ma.
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly. So I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I don't think I can write that way. And they said, okay, well, then we're not
Thank
interested in
you.
publishing your book.
Mhm.
And I remember the day that the last publisher rejected the book. I closed myself in my bathroom and I legitimately sat on the floor and just wept. And I felt so strong, like my
Mm.
dreams are over. I'll never amount to anything, but
Mm.
all those
Yeah.
stories we tell ourselves. And I sat there, I had a good cry, and then I just heard a voice, which is I think of as inner wisdom or God or your guardian angels or whatever you
Something.
believe
Yeah.
in, said, you already did the hard part.
Mhm.
You wrote the book, you did the hard part. And I was like, you're right, I did do the hard part. And I got up off the bathroom floor and I went to the kitchen and I Googled how do you self-publish a book.
Mhm.
And I figured out how to self-publish, and that book came out, and I think 5 people bought copies. And then I still don't know really how, but one person would recommend it to another, who would recommend it to another. And over the next 6 months, that book kept growing and getting bigger. And the exact reason no publisher wanted it, because it was too sweet, is the
Mhm.
exact reason it was successful, because the market was saturated with one kind of thing. And it kept getting more and more popular. 6 months later, a publisher reached out and said, hey, we can see how well this is doing. We'd like to publish this book and we think it's a series. And I always tell that story because if I had listened to the voice of authority,
Right.
if I had listened to the rejection, if I had listened to everybody else who was smarter than me on the subject,
Mhm.
that book would still be sitting on my computer. So I always love this idea that, like, you did the hard part.
Yeah.
You did the hard part and see where you can take it. And that book
Push it over the finish line.
launched my career as an author. And then years later, I had another dear friend who is a nonfiction author who said, what would you write to women? What would you say if you could say anything? And I never even knew the idea was inside of me, and immediately it came pouring out, just like, "Oh, I just wish women knew how powerful they were. I wish they knew to stand back up and go again. I wish they knew that
Mhm.
failure is part of the process." I was so passionate, I kept just, like, spitting all these ideas out, and I was like, "Girl, stand up and go again.
Yeah.
Girl, like, believe in yourself. Girl." And she said, "Girl, wash your face." And I was like,
Uh-huh.
"That's a really good title for a book."
Yeah.
And the rest is sort of
And the
history.
rest is
So
history.
what?
Yeah.
What?
Then 3 New York Times bestsellers later. Here we
Yeah,
That
are.
exactly.
that don't let that one slide by, because that last beautiful point that Connie said. Oh wait, 3 New York Times bestsellers. Girl, what?
Soon to be fourth.
Soon to be fourth. But the first one, girl, wash your face. Girl, stop apologizing. And I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, didn't see that coming, yeah.
And
Yeah.
so in the latest, and those are 3 New York Times bestsellers.
Yeah, and the really cool thing about Girl Wash Your Face, I had dreamed of being a New York Times bestseller for as long as I'd been writing
Sure.
books. But what so many people didn't realize was the successful book was book number 5.
Mhm.
It wasn't book number 1 or
Right.
2 or 3, it was
Mhm.
book 5.
Mhm.
So when it was successful and no one had ever heard of me before, people would say, "Oh my gosh, you have had this success on your first book." And I was like,
Overnight.
"No, I
Yeah.
have not." It really did take a while. And even when it came out, it was not an instant bestseller. It was very similar to Party Girl, my first fiction book, where a few people read it and then they gave it to their friends, they gave it to their friends. And
Mm.
3 months after it came out, it hit the New York Times list, which is pretty unheard of. You
Mhm.
kind of have that one initial push and you hope it works. But yeah, where I am today is it's a lot of like slow burn
Mhm.
and just trying to do really good work and then hoping that if you do really good work, people will pass the work around.
Well, now that you have 3 bestsellers, why do you think people love your book? Mostly women, of course.
My instinct has always been that in a world of sort of being perfect and needing to be a certain way in order to
Mhm.
fit in, I have always talked about the things you're not supposed to talk about. Even in the new book, I had a new editor who wasn't as familiar with my style of writing, and so many times she was like, you're really talking about perimenopause a lot, and you're really
Mhm.
talking about this a lot, and you're talking about postpartum depression a lot. And I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
'cause we are really living with this
Mhm.
stuff every
Mhm.
single day, and no one's talking about it. And I try and always write as much as I can with humor because I think life is hard and we should
Right.
laugh about what we're going through. But I try and tell real life stories and share real life experiences, and I never, ever want it to feel like I am an expert because I'm not. I'm barely figuring out my own life. What I hope I'm doing is being your friend and telling you some ideas that work for me. And even
Mhm.
if my ideas don't work for you, just you hearing about the journey I took to get to them might encourage you to go on your own journey.
Yeah,
So,
inspire some other idea.
so that
Go ahead,
point,
Harry.
one of my questions that Connie stole, which was what Oprah asked you, which is why do you think your books are so popular? And your answer is so magnificent in what you just said, which is my experience of you. I said to my wife, she's so good for women of her. She describes her life during her ages and stages of her life. And for women who don't have role models or mothers or sisters or dear, wise, mentory friends who can give them the counsel and the experience and the story of reality, you provide that for them. As I listened to your books and listened to your podcast, I hope that men, some portion of men, would avail themselves of the wisdom, because there's a ton there. I know we know this, and it's really quite impressive in its real, authentic nature. You say, and I don't know where you got this quote from, but I've stolen it and used it, we should teach from our scars, never from our wounds. And what you have done is you wait for them to heal a little bit before you speak about the lessons from those scars. And just this morning, I was listening to a bunch of stuff. I won't talk about what you're talking about this morning on your podcast, but I don't have a uterus. So it was extremely valuable for people who do or did.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you for the work you do.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Welcome.
Well, and he has become a student of your work, and which has been fun for me, because I mean, you dove right in, first of all, and he's not only talked and bragged about how this insight and the way you talk is, there's so much of it's so good for all humans. Age, gender, it doesn't matter. But I think the other thing that you talked about, Harry, was I think the piece that Rachel does where she's so honest, and it's just genuine. I think that's the most important part of all of it.
One of the things that we talk about, Connie, is that being heliotropic, being the sun, being this positive energizer, one of the qualities, just one, there are many, is authenticity and authentic vulnerability, which makes people go, oh, I like that person. That's one of the reasons why you are so effective. You write, if you can't see it, how can you know that you can be it? One of the things that we want this podcast to be is to show people, look, there's one. There's an example. Look, there's one. And from that, seeing it, oh, I guess I could do it too. Yeah, you do it.
Yeah, there's actually, I can't remember whose quote that is originally, someone much wiser than me, but it is such a real thing, particularly for communities who maybe haven't seen examples of themselves succeeding in certain ways, whether that's women or people of color or people in lower socioeconomic environments. Like, if you haven't seen someone from your community be a judge, be a athlete, lead a team, have a healthy family, be a healthy person, deal with mental health. Like, if you have no model of that behavior, you assume it's for someone other than you. That's a really common thing within my community of readers and listeners, is this idea you see someone doing something that you really admire and think would be great, and you're like, oh, but that's for that kind of person. That's for her. That's for my sister. That's for my mother-in-law. Like, I could never experience that. Yeah. And it's just such a lie that really holds us hostage or keeps us stuck in this space that we're living in, because we don't understand how powerful we are. We're so incredibly powerful, and it takes that courage to, like, just take a step. Just try one thing. Just see what happens when you go outside your comfort zone. And in doing so, you probably surprise yourself. So modeling behavior was one of the first things I learned when I was getting into personal development, was like, who can you see who's doing the thing that you're doing? And it's actually how I found myself inside of this world. Is I got really into personal development. I wanted to work on myself, and I wanted to heal and do therapy and all of the things. And I didn't have examples. So I started to go to personal development conferences, and they were so helpful for me. Like Tony Robbins was so helpful for me. And there's incredible teachers that were so wise
Right.
and I learned so much from. But every single conference I went to, and this is a decade ago, were men. And not only were they men, but they were like very alpha male, like intense, scream
Hmm.
at you.
Yep.
Like, and if you look at a lot of my earlier work, I can see myself modeling that behavior because
Hmm.
I didn't know what it looked like to do that from my own perspective. But I really landed inside this world because I would sit at those conferences and just get more and more frustrated. Like, why is there a woman never speaking? Where are
Hmm.
the women? And it was especially important to me because I remember being at a conference and I was so fired up. And it was like, go home and you're gonna kill it. And there's no excuses or like, do the
Go.
thing. And I was like, yeah, but I gotta make school lunches for 3
Yeah.
kids, and yeah, but there are excuses. There's
Hmm.
really good justifiable reasons in our life, whether you're caring for kids, trying to heal yourself, caring for an aging parent, like, there's all of these things that commonly fall on women
Hmm.
that do prevent us from pursuing things. So I was like, who is talking to us using our language? And I just kept thinking, who is it? Who is it? Who is it? And one day I was like, oh, maybe it's supposed to be me.
Don't you love that?
Well, and Harry, the other thing you pointed out to me is as you've read these books, especially in such a short span of time, you've actually watched this evolution of Rachel. You said it's like I feel like I've watched her grow up, which there's so
Yeah.
many listeners and followers of yours. Like my daughter's 33. So she's been following you since she was a young person coming out of school and now she's a mom. And I watched that she's grown with you because your lives have grown and changed at the
Yeah.
same time. So,
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
Well, I think that's a lot of what the new book is about is this. When I wrote Girl Wash Your Face, I really felt like if I wanted to help people, I had to have their answers.
Mhm.
I was like, I can tell you what to do. I can tell you ideas. I can help you get through this. And I'm older now and I've had a really hard 5 years that has softened my heart and my spirit in a lot of ways, and I come out the other side of that just realizing I cannot possibly have answers for other people. I barely have answers for myself, but I can walk beside you and I can share some questions that really helped me to do my own deep dive and my own unpacking. And so that was the impetus for this book was could I give you potentially a framework to give yourself answers? So you're not getting my ideas or my wisdom, you're getting hopefully your own.
right.
So we
Well,
got an advanced copy,
what you said.
which we read,
Mhm.
and everyone will get one in January. But when Connie and I went through it, it really is the evolution of your growing up and becoming the wiser sage that you are. Loved those questions, all 26 of them. We're not going to rattle off
Thank you.
all of them, but we love them for the purpose, for what you just articulated their purposes to be, to help the reader go, oh, yeah, that's good. I used them. I love them. I mean, I'll just give you one. Oh, my, there's someone. What's your floor?
Yeah.
And I'm just going to a little tease on this one. You can speak to, but what I took from that, what we take, our work, this be the sun, not the salt. We want a zero floor for salty behavior. We want a zero tolerance
Mhm.
for being snarky at all. Well, everyone gets snarky. Yeah, but I don't. I want to be, like you said, I want to be welcoming always. I want my floor to be zero tolerance. So anyway, that's just one of the questions that you ask that I think I think will help a ton of.
Yeah, that was hugely influential in my life in learning how to evolve, in learning how to grow, whether it was in being an entrepreneur and growing my business or doing better as a person, doing better in my health. Understanding, like when I was younger, and I talk about this in this chapter, is this idea that like I thought, oh, all I need is an imagination. If I have a big imagination and I work really hard, then I can achieve anything. And what I've come to understand over time is that it doesn't matter how big the sky is if you keep devolving if you keep backtracking, if you keep backsliding, if
Mhm.
you keep going
Right.
backwards. So the thing that actually affects change in our life, really positive change, is not coming up with bigger, grander ideas. It's about readjusting what is your standard? What is the floor on which you stand? If you say, I'm putting my flag in the ground right here,
Mhm.
and I will never again go back to the way things were, that's what elevates your life. Because now you're actually starting at a higher level. You're actually starting closer to the sky
Right.
because your elevation has changed. It's the decisions that we make where we say, never again. Once we make a never again decision, that's when we really start to see things explode in
Mhm.
positive ways.
So beautiful. You have another one. If everything around you is unhealthy becomes the
Yeah.
standard, it's the fish. What do you think of the water? What's water? It's
Yeah.
we can't sometimes we humans can't see what's our unhealthy standard.
Yeah.
And
Well, especially if it's the environment you grew up inside of.
right.
I
Right.
think a lot of us experience this when we grow up and if we decide to get married or we get a partner, and perhaps that partner comes from a healthier family.
Mhm.
And then you go home for Hanukkah, you go home for Thanksgiving, you go home for Christmas, you meet their family and you're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
what? Oh, you guys don't scream at each other and it's not stressful and people are kind and
You're having
you
fun.
you're having fun."
Yeah.
Or the opposite is true. You go into their family home expecting what you grew up with, which was kind and beautiful, and you encounter something completely different. I think that's one of the things that changes the biology of a family tree is when new elements come into it and suddenly you have a different perspective.
Right.
So it's so important to go to new places, to meet new people, to bring new friends into your environment so that we're constantly expanding our worldview to understand. We see this a lot in like if you were raised in certain environment. I was raised in a very religious, very conservative environment that was incredibly patriarchal and had a lot of opinions about women and how they should act and behave. And it's taken 20 years of therapy to try
To
and
get close.
unpack all of these beliefs that I had in my head about the way I was supposed to show up and be a good girl.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they'll still, layers of onion that I'll keep peeling back. But if if you're not ever exposed to any other people or any other thought process, you won't realize the narratives that you have come to believe.
And that's your point is always you have to set those thresholds. It's the same thing that Harry was talking about with salt. We can't expect people not to be salty, but we're going to expect zero tolerance from ourselves to deliver it.
Yes.
Now we're going to mess
Yeah.
up and we're going to make it better and we're going to apologize, but that's setting those thresholds and levels of tolerance. So it's important for you to do for yourself. Don't worry about
Yeah.
everybody else.
Yeah.
You said another, I couldn't agree with you guys more. You said another beautiful thing, which is and you said it just recently about the family we grew up in. We all have preposterous beliefs. We just
Oh,
don't
sure.
know which ones they are yet. I can't tell you how many
Yeah.
times, ever since I either read it, heard it, or you said, I don't know where I got it from
Mhm.
you.
Yeah, I think I think her name's Stacy Schiff. She wrote a book called Witches, and she's actually talking about the Salem witch trials, that we all have these
Oh,
preposterous beliefs, we just don't know what they are yet. And the joke I make in the book is like she's referring to this religious oppression of women. Thank goodness we don't do that anymore. And obviously we
wink,
do.
wink. Yes.
But I mean, that literally, I think that's in the first chapter of the book is the Mike Tyson quote, everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face. That we all have these capital T truths. Every single person who is listening to us have this conversation right now, we have capital T truths we believe with all our might. And it is only because life has not yet punched us in the face around this particular topic that we hold firm to our thoughts there.
Mhm.
So, what I've learned over the last 5 years is or 41 years, depending on how you want to look at it, is that I want to hold a lot more grace for my belief system to understand that, like, yeah, this is what I think,
Mhm.
but simultaneously, I haven't had that person's life experience. I
Yeah.
don't
Right.
know what that feels like. I don't know how that might show up or how I might be a different person if I was born into the world that they're in. So, yeah, just holding space for the fact that at any moment, you are one life experience away from something completely shifting the way you see a particular part of your life. So not to be so like tightly grasping to the belief because it could change at a moment's notice.
Would you be able to share one of those capital T truths that you got punched in the face to realize?
Oh my gosh, I have so many. I think a lot of mine really stem from childhood, and probably
Okay.
most people's do.
Hmm.
And I go back to this growing up in a really conservative home. My father was a Pentecostal minister. My grandfather was a
Yeah.
Pentecostal minister of Southern descent. So, really fire and brimstone and ideas about the way things were. And probably one of the biggest for me was I was raised in an environment that if you did not believe exactly how we believed, meaning like if you didn't go to our church and believe exactly like we believed, then you were a sinner and
Mm.
you were evil and you were scary and we should stay away from you. And so much of the way we were taught to understand the world was through that lens. And I grew up
Yeah.
in a small town, so I was not exposed to a lot of different people. And now I find myself at 41, like completely different end
Hmm.
of the spectrum. But honestly, even as I started to grow up and adjust and change my worldview, I had a lot of fear around, am I allowed to believe, like, am I allowed to
Right.
think that everybody has the right to be themselves? Am I allowed to believe that they have that freedom? Am I gonna get in trouble? Am
Hmm.
I wrong? Am I a sinner? I know
With
that
that,
word
yeah.
sounds so ridiculous to me now, but it was used in a lot of ways to oppress the members of our church and the way that we were
Hmm.
brought up. So that's a huge one. I think even if you didn't grow up in the same kind of place I did, I bet a lot of people have their version of that.
Some version, yeah.
Yeah, that you just sort of you adopt the behaviors or the ideas
Hmm.
of your family of origin. And mine took a lot of unpacking to understand that I didn't want to carry that same dogmatic view of the world.
Yeah, we all come with a narrative
Oh,
from childhood for sure.
we all have a narrative that infects our lives, whether we realize those narratives or not. And kind of your point about those narratives, Rachel, yours too. Oh my God, you have to see them to have anything to say about them, but sometimes they are
Hmm.
unconscious. So if they can be made conscious, if I can be aware, I was
Yeah.
just telling these guys right before you came on, my dad had a sentence that went into my head and it's still in my head. And it's a nutty sentence, but at least I can see it. And therefore I have a little bit of distance and some freedom from it.
Yeah. I have a really lovely and dear mentorship in Bob Goff. And he has this
Mm.
line that I love that he's told me more than once, and I think has written about and talks about when he gives keynotes and stuff. But he says, we all have stuff written on our cave walls. And every once in a while, you got to go take a torch and you got to walk into the cave and you got to see what was written on your cave walls. Because, and he's telling the story of his own father, and a lot of the things his dad had quite a lot of fear, and his dad tried to instill that fear in his children.
Mm.
So he's like, man, I have a lot of fear written on my walls.
Hmm?
And if I don't go in and like hold a light up to those beliefs, I will continue to accidentally fall into a narrative that is not my own.
Beautiful.
And I love that visual of the purposefully, intentionally blasting that off with fire. That's interesting.
Well, and the fact that the cave is pretty scary.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't know what's
Scary
in here.
and
This is
ancient.
dark and
Yep.
old and all of those things. And it takes a little bit of like a Indiana Jones, like some courage to walk in there and go, okay,
Hmm.
I'm going to confront this stuff.
Yep. And the curiosity to want to do it.
And you're incredibly brave in your self-inquiry muscle, your ability to do therapy, your ability to go deep inside to say, okay, what's going on? What kind of stupid narratives and where do they come from? You have got huge backbone to go after this. What we want to do is allow people who perhaps might not have the backbone to go deep into therapy or self-work in this very moment. Every single person listening to this podcast and every single person on the planet can be as kind and as welcoming as they already are, a smidgen more.
Mhm.
Your beautiful, welcoming vibe to me is available. Everybody can do that. Everyone can smile at a stranger. Everyone can hold the door. everyone can say, thank you, or please, or I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Continue. Those moments, the tiniest moments, I want for all of our listeners to go, well, at least I can do that. Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Good.
And could I add to that too?
Yes.
My instinct is to say that starts with a kindness to yourself. So often we're taught to be nice, to be good girls and good boys and leaders and do these things for other people. Nobody ever taught me to love myself. Nobody ever taught me that oftentimes if you struggle to give grace and compassion to other people, it's because you don't give it to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the most judgmental people in the world are in their own minds, they must be so brutal to themselves and hold
Mm-hmm.
themselves to such an impossible standard. And so it gives them permission to be judgmental of others because they're judging themselves
Right.
constantly. As we go into this, especially going into a new year, and we're looking out over 2025 and we're trying to be better, to make a greater, better impact on the world
Mm-hmm.
around us, I cannot even express how much learning to go inward and really
Mm-hmm.
work on my own heart and really be graceful with my own self and really going like, yeah, you mess up sometimes. Everybody does. We're going to try again tomorrow. We're going to try again in 5 minutes. Like that
Mm-hmm.
has allowed me to be so much more loving to others, especially for anyone listening who is a parent. I did this all the time with my kids where I'm like, I'll get frustrated. I have a 7-year-old daughter who's a very strong-willed child, and she will destroy your spirit at any given moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll get really frustrated with her, and she can tell that I'm frustrated. Maybe my voice is higher than I want it to be, and maybe I'm speaking more intensely, and I'll walk out of the room, and then I'm like, "Oh, man, I really just messed that up. Like, I did not show up in that moment the way I wanted to." And I can ignore that the way my parents would have done.
Right.
And I can go, well, she's a kid and it's her job to listen
She
and it's
needs
my
to know.
job to, yeah, exactly. Or I can understand that's not how I wanted to show up in that moment. I can be graceful with myself and then I can walk back in and model that behavior for her. Hey, babe, I'm so sorry. Like, mama didn't mean to get upset. I'm going to try again. I felt really frustrated. Let's be better at talking that out next
Mm-hmm.
time. But that's only possible if I can be forgiving of myself
Right.
and admit to myself that I've messed up so that I can go and better show up for other people.
Hallelujah. Mic drop.
Mm-hmm.
Let's cut that piece out and post that around the world. Seriously, because that insight you think is not as, I mean, maybe it's not as aware for others to understand it, but it really is the truth of it, Rachel, which is if you are graceful, if we are graceful and kind to ourselves and self-loving, then we can love another. You have a great quote, which is you can never hate yourself healthy, which is the
Yes.
opposite of
Yeah.
of being kind to yourself. You should never, let me repeat that, never say, I hate the way I look. Would you go to town on that, please?
Yeah. I mean, this is my community is predominantly women. So this is a huge thing, body image and the way we perceive ourselves and how we were taught to behave and just all of this garbage that is heaped on us. And I can't even explain. I'm sure all of the women listening to this
Mhm.
are on this call right now. We all have our version of this where you
Right.
think, man, if I could just take this thought out of my head, if I could just remove all thoughts of body image, of not looking the right way, the space I would free up in my brain. I mean, we'd probably
Absolutely.
have a cure for everything by now if women weren't so obsessed with their thighs. But most of us are taught that if you can dislike something enough, then you can fix it. If you can see enough examples of how you don't measure up, how you're to this, to that, to whatever, that then enough of that hatred will motivate you to eat less and
Mhm.
to do this or work out in this way. And it's just garbage. If it worked, we wouldn't have a
Right.
multi-billion-dollar diet industry built around trying another one and then trying this one and then
Mhm.
trying that one. So my alternative and what I really try to lean into with myself is like, you can hate yourself thin. but you can't hate yourself healthy,
Thank you.
because healthy
Right.
is mind, body, spirit,
The
soul,
whole
all of it.
package.
And
Right.
just because you got super thin and you looked good in a bikini on Instagram doesn't mean that what's going on the inside is whole and healthy.
Mhm.
So it's kind of the opposite of everything that we're taught. But it really is astounding when you start to flip the narrative, you start to challenge the narrative, you start to realize, like Stacy Schiff says, that this is preposterous. This is a preposterous belief. And what if actually I am worthy and enough as I am right now today? And I
Mhm.
don't need to do one more thing to be more worthy. What if we start from that place?
I know.
And what if we start to take care of our health because we love ourselves? Not because we want to change ourselves, but because we love ourselves. We want to be the best that we can
Take
be. We
care.
want to live as long as possible. We want to feel good in this one body that
Mhm.
we've been given. That's how we pursue health. It's not from a place of wanting to look a certain way. It's from a place of wanting to feel a certain way.
I just love that we get to share this with the world. I
Mhm.
want more people. I want more men to hear this. Well, I'm a man. I'm part of this community. I get to listen to this, and I agree with and believe and practice. And something I said to you, and you reminded me correctly. I said, "Doesn't everybody already know this?" And you said, "No, no, they
Nope.
don't."
Yeah.
Well,
they
you're a
don't.
student of life. I mean, I saw that. I don't know if somebody described you as student of life, sharer of ideas, and you're a student of life, and yet every day you work at it. And
Oh
that's
my
the
gosh.
reminder for all of us
Mhm.
is that's something we talk about every day. We
Yeah.
just strive to be a little bit better every day.
Yeah.
We do set our threshold. The low is none. We wanted none of that bad stuff.
Yeah.
But we're going to get there.
Yeah.
We're going to get there. We're going to try not to. And I think that's where sending this message throughout the airwaves, whoever we can talk to, that it's all right.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
okay. You can try your hardest. You're still not going to be perfect.
Yeah, that was honestly the first personal development conference I went to a decade ago was Tony Robbins. And I love him and I'm very grateful for him and his work because it's helped me a lot. But he had this line at that conference I had never heard before. And it just,
Mm.
my brain exploded. I was like, what? And he said, the training never stops. The training never stops. If you want to continue to be a good partner to your spouse, if you want to be a good parent for your kids, you want to be a good leader at your company, you want to be a good person, you want to be healthy, you don't stop. Every day you wake up and you try again. And you must do that because
Right.
we all fall short. We all screw up. We all have whole weeks, maybe a month, maybe a
Mhm.
quarter of your life where you're like, "What? We're gonna write that one off. That wasn't my
Mhm.
best work. I'm gonna try again." So
Mhm.
that really resonated with me because I had never heard someone say that life was something that you would continue to work on for as long as you're here.
Right. And you're going to keep getting those punches in the face. And that's one of the things that I thought was such a good way to describe what happens at certain points in your life because you don't feel like you're going to get back up from it. And yet they're going to keep coming. So you got to be
Yeah.
ready, got to be
Yeah.
resilient. You got to learn from them.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No,
Harry.
go.
I was just going to say the last book I wrote, which was in 2020, was about this idea that the most painful things that have ever happened to me was never the stuff I was afraid of.
Right.
For anybody like me who has struggled with anxiety, who has made up every possible scenario about how it could all go wrong, it's never those things
Right.
that knock me on my butt. It's the stuff I didn't know was going to happen. And I actually think it's way more traumatic for us, like a pandemic or finding out that your partner has cheated or losing your job, because it is so shocking to your system. It's
Mhm.
way more traumatic to get through. So it's those moments that you don't expect to be thrown off that scare us the most and
Mhm.
keep us from wanting to do something else. It's like, okay, well, if I could just stay here and stay safe and don't do
Mhm.
anything, then maybe I won't rock the boat and maybe nothing bad will happen.
Mhm.
And 1 year goes by and 5 years goes by and 10 years goes by. And then you realize you have lost all of this time trying to stay safe, which was impossible.
Right.
I think, honestly, I don't know if you guys feel like that. Like, pandemic did that to a lot of people.
Mhm.
And I sort of wonder if there aren't still some people who are frozen in the fear of that time period because they're like, I just don't want anything bad to happen again. unfortunately, life is up and down and bad will
Mhm.
find us. So using that as your rationale for why you don't pursue more
Right.
love, more joy, more hope, more opportunity, more faith, it's actually a plan that doesn't work.
Right.
It will come back around no matter
Right.
what.
Yeah.
So if the hard times are going to find you, let them find you laughing. Let them find you
Right.
dancing. Let them find you trying to build a company. Let them
Right.
find you doing something worth doing.
Because they're going to sneak up on you anyway. So you might as well
Absolutely.
be having fun at the time.
Yes.
I never think like that, which is helpful for me now, which is, oh, the bad times are going to find you. I never even thought about bad times finding me. So,
Yes.
Well, and if anyone who hasn't read that book didn't see that coming, I mean, it came at a time where you had enough to talk about, and then more happened.
Right.
And
Right.
it was like, wait, when is this going to stop? And then you
Yes.
published. Did you publish
Yes.
right before COVID, or did it go out in the world
No,
during
that
COVID?
came out during COVID. That came out
That's what I thought.
September of 2020. And it was really intentional. I wanted to write something to speak to the time period that we were in. And I had lived through so much, unfortunately, so much trauma and grief in my life. I thought, well, I got some ideas about how you
Mhm.
handle the hard things. And I talk about, I know you guys read the new book. I talk about this in the new book that I had told myself so many times, like, okay, well, this is the worst it can get.
mhm.
Okay, well, this is the worst it can get. And honestly, I don't know what the worst it can. I hope, God, I hope.
Let's hope.
Universe, I feel like I'm good. I am,
Yeah.
but none of us know what tomorrow holds. So if
Mhm.
you live in this place of fear and hope that staying here is going to keep you from encountering anything bad or hard, it's not ever going to work. There's a beautiful essay, if you've never read it, by, who wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe?
Oh,
Don't know.
C.S.
Um,
Lewis. C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis has the most incredible essay that, and I hope I'm not misquoting, about when it's like World War II or the atomic bomb. There's something to do with bombs. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Someone will fact check me here. But he writes this essay about if a bomb is going to drop on you,
Mhm.
let it find you at the pub with your friends, having a drink and telling a story. Let it find you at your daughter's wedding, dancing all night long.
Mhm.
If a bomb is going to find us, he's talking about the
Right.
war. He's like, if we're going down, we will not go down in our house,
Hiding.
in a bunker, hiding. Like, let it
Mhm.
find us living our life. If you haven't read it, it's absolutely gorgeous. You should look it up.
We will make sure that's in the show notes because I want to make sure I
Yeah.
read it.
I like
That's
the
great.
image of dancing at your
Mhm.
kid's wedding or being at the pub with your brothers or sisters. Let it happen, but live this life magnificently. That's my goal. I want to live a
Yeah.
magnificent life. One of the things that you said, and I think it's your intro to your podcast or who you are, and it's one of the reasons that I found you delightful, is that you are a seeker. You described
Mhm.
yourself as a seeker. Now, for those that know, what do you mean? A seeker of what? And
Information, ideas.
not
I'm so
wisdom. You want
curious.
wisdom.
Yeah.
You don't want just
so
info.
curious.
You want
Yeah.
wisdom, and the wisdom
Yeah.
that you seek, I seek too. And
Yeah.
when I think about, well, doesn't everyone already know this? The answer is not only no, but it ain't the same river and we're not the same person. So you get up and you get to do this again. I'm hearing
Yeah.
things from you differently than I've heard before because I'm not the same person. And this is a different time than the last time, than this morning when I was listening
That,
to you.
yes, that is so important. And I don't think we click into that enough.
Nope.
I have heard preachers, priests, rabbis, teachers, personal
Mhm.
development gurus, Oprah.
Mm.
Like, I've heard so many people say the same line,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Over 30 years, you'll hear it in a sermon, you'll hear it at a conference, you'll hear it, you'll read it in a book. And then one day, on a
Mhm.
particular random
Mhm.
Tuesday, you will read that same line again and it will hit you like an arrow through the heart.
Right.
And
Mhm.
you're like, "Ooh, I needed that today."
That's right.
So sometimes I think we have to hear things over and over for it to click or to
Mhm.
be the kind of person who can even take that information in.
Right.
This is the whole
And-
point. Every single morning, Rachel, I've been writing. I wrote this book and only wrote it 5 years ago, but Be the Sun, Not the Salt, one-page chapters, since January 1, I read the chapter based on the day. Today is Be Your Best Self, and I send out a note to 50 people. I was reflecting on it today because I need to hear it today. Now it's the
Yes.
11th month of the year. I've been doing this over and over again, but it's different for me. Be Your Best Self is your chapter. What's working? Do more of that. What's working?
Yes.
Do more of what it looks like when you're at your best.
Your very best.
I can do that some more today. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I think I've talked about Pareto's principle in the last 3 books that I've written because I just think it's such a wise way to look at life. I first learned it for business. And if your listeners aren't familiar, it's this idea. And I put the actual information about him. He was an Italian economist,
Yes,
something.
Alfredo
Thank you. I'm like,
Pareto.
exactly. Who realized that 80% of the yield of his garden was coming from only 20% of the plants that were in his garden. And then he started to look at this like, oh, wow, 80% of the land in this town is owned by only 20% of its citizens. And oh, my business, 80% of the revenue that I make or the profit that I make in my business is about 20% of my customers. So the 80-20 principle, and there's a million books on it that people can read, much wiser than I, but it really is such a smart way to look at your life. If you understand that 20 or 80% of the results you're getting, good or bad, are coming from 20% of your actions, well, if you can identify the 20% of your actions that are giving you the results you want and just do more of those things, that's where we see the revenue in your business explode. That's where we see your marriage flourish because you're leaning into those areas that really make a lot of impact for your partner. That's where you see, wow, I'm really making incredible progress on this project because I'm just doing the things that work.
The best.
Little idea of focus on what's working so that you can do more of it allows people, so it's not a bridge too far. No, do what you're already doing, the magnificent things you're already doing, giving yourself grace, talking to yourself with love and kindness, drinking enough water every morning, going to do all the self-care things that we do. Do that some more, because that 20%, it's so powerful. Let's just lean into it, period. You exemplify that, you practice that, you believe that, you do that, and all of our listeners will hopefully go, you know what? I can do that.
Well, I think the format of the new book is going to enable people to do that because what you've done is write it in a series of questions. You already said that. We could actually start doing that too, Harry. We can start going through Rachel's book, chapter 1, on the 1st of the month.
Why not? Seriously.
Because they're really,
It'd be easy.
but we laugh, but it's a really good
Twice a
process
month. There's
because
26 of them. Connie, we would do that. It'd be simple and
we have a
easy
few
to
days
do.
off.
Done.
Yeah.
I think
it's just,
how it goes.
yeah, we will. We will, but it's a good discipline for us, especially obviously with the way the Be the Sun, Not the Salt is written, but for your book, even just asking the questions, work your way through this book a day at a time if you have to, but asking these questions of yourself to get your own answers is the power of what you've put in front of, well, not coming out in January, right?
Coming out in January. If you guys end up releasing this before January, I will say that the pre-order gift for the book is so good, and I'm so proud of it because I wrote it myself, is a workbook that goes along with the questions because I don't know about your audience, but my audience, she loves a journal session. She loves to unpack. So I really wanted to give them something that they could physically just sort of take a deep dive in and of themselves and figure out these questions. So if you pre-order the book before January 7th, you can go to my website, upload proof of receipt, and then you get this like 50-page PDF. So you can use it in your iPad and fill it out, or you can print it out. But if you want to take a deep dive, it's totally free and it's my gift to you. Jump into the process.
Who doesn't love something to scribble on? So the book, in it, I don't even know if we've said it enough times, but What If You Are the Answer is the name of the book, coming out in January. And I did see that it's on Amazon for pre-order. So
yeah, it is there. Yeah, you can grab it anywhere.
Good.
We are honored. We are grateful. We are so pleased to have met you, to be a part of your ecosystem, your community. And as a soon-to-be 70-year-old man, I love being part of this community. And
Harry, you did have one question you wanted to make sure. Who's the heliotropic person that has changed your life?
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, tell me your definition of heliotropic again. I know you did this when we sat
Mhm.
down, but what
Heli-
is your definition of this?
heliotropic means a positive energizer, a person who exudes the qualities that uplift you or anyone around him, or generosity, compassion, kindness, curiosity are just a few of the qualities that make someone heliotropic. So,
Like leaning, like
Yeah.
the way a plant leans towards the sun. It's the kind of
Yeah.
people that we lean to for nourishment and warmth and energy.
Definitely, my fiance, which maybe by the time this comes out will be my husband, but,
Your boo.
my boo,
It's a
I reference him a lot in the book, but he has been the most incredible gift in my life, not just for me, but for my children as
love that
well.
for you.
He's the most compassionate person. He's the most grace-filled. He's very calm. He's very centered. He's very grounded, which is beautiful for me because I tend to be sort of like fiery and loud, and he's just a beautiful yin to my yang. And I think a lot of my growth is because I am in the presence of someone who is just a lot more centered at
Mhm.
times than I can be. So, yeah, he's been incredible for me.
We love that for you.
we
It was a
Thank
do.
you. I
good
do
time of
too.
life. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
I mean,
That's great.
this notion, Connie, that we want to be that person, we want to be
Mhm.
like that
Right.
person, we want to be like him. We want to surround ourselves with people like him.
Yeah.
And to the extent that this podcast reinforces, hey, come and join us in the being the wonderful heliotropic person that you more, come and join us. That's what we hope that we can do in this world, that we make, help, support anyone who's listening in or watching. I could do that. I could be,
Yeah.
I could do that. And you know what? I'm gonna do that from now on. So,
Yeah. Pleasure getting to know you. Like I said, I was very jealous when Harry got to come out and visit the studio in California. So enjoyed meeting you today. Tropic people leave you feeling better than when they arrived, and you did that, just that. Your warmth and generosity just comes oozing out of you. So thank you for sharing that with us today and
Thank you,
the
guys.
listeners. And thanks for letting us have an advanced copy of the book because we got excited, and hopefully all of our listeners are just as excited.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rachel.
our absolute pleasure.